join forces for a better world. The forum is organized by World Scientific Publishing. Now moving on to the next slide. So just for a few housekeeping notes before we start. So you are most welcome to leave your camera on, but please keep the mics muted while the forum is ongoing. There will be a Q&A session after the talk, so please feel free to post your questions to the special guest and co-moderators in the chat at any time. After posting your questions in the chat, you may be invited to unmute and read it out during the Q&A session if you are comfortable in doing so. Also, this webinar will be recorded and posted online. Now moving on to the next slide. So for this China and the World Forum, we are honored to welcome Sudheendra Kulkarni as our special guest, a distinguished thought leader and advocate for peaceful South Asian cooperation, for compelling discussion on why India and China must work together to shape a more stable and prosperous world. So today's session will explore the necessity of India-China cooperation, not just for regional stability, but for tackling global challenges, from economic development to climate change and reforming global governance structures like BRICS. Sudheendra Kulkarni will provide key insights into how both countries can transcend their differences to lead Asia and the world to a more harmonious future. Moving on to the next slide. Now to introduce and give a little bit more information, please go back to the previous slide. To introduce our special guest and provide more information, so Sudheendra Kulkarni is a distinguished Indian socio-political activist, author and thought leader dedicated to fostering peace and cooperation in Asia. He has played a key role in policy making, having worked closely with former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Deputy Prime Minister L.K. Advani. As a close aide to Vajpayee, he was deeply involved in shaping key political strategies. As the founder and chairman of the Forum for a New Asia, he actively promotes dialogue and collaboration between India, Pakistan, and China. A passionate advocate for progressive governance and international harmony, Sudheendra Kulkarni continues to inspire through his writings, speeches, and initiatives aimed at building a peaceful and prosperous region. Now, we are also pleased to welcome back our panel of experienced co-moderators. So the first is Mike Liu, who is an accomplished executive with over 35 years of experience in leading tech firms. So his career spans Greater China, India, the US, and the Asia Pacific, Singapore-based region, where he has held executive roles to drive the growth. He is also former country head for Infosys Technology in China, which is one of India's iconic logos in IT services, and he is currently with a leading think tank, the Center for China and Globalization, where he is responsible for providing advisory services to business sectors. Now moving on to the next slide. Then lastly, joining us as well is Professor Darshan Fung, Honorary Dean of Henan University Belt and Road Research Institute and the Chief Advisor of China Silk Road I-Valley Research Institute. Now, without further ado, let us welcome Sudheendra Kulkarni to kick off his discussion.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes. Shazmin, I want to go to my slides.
If you go to the bottom where it says share.
Yeah.
And then if you repeat what we previously did, then you'll be.
Yeah. Is it okay now?
Perfect. Yeah, all perfect.
Okay. Yeah. Good evening, friends. I'm Sudheendra Kulkarni from New Delhi, India. My warm greetings to all of you. You come from different parts of the world, friends in China, India, Europe, elsewhere in the world. My sincere thanks to World Scientific Publishing and China and the World Forum for inviting me to participate in this important discussion. I'm so happy that I'm joined by two distinguished co-panelists, my good friend, Mr. Mike Liu from Beijing and Professor Feng from the USA. My very special thanks to Ms. Shazmin Mia, who has painstakingly worked for organizing this event. Friends, the theme of my keynote is why India and China must join hands to create a better world. I shall slightly expand this theme and also talk about Asia's responsibility in shaping a better world in the 21st century. After all, India and China are the two largest countries in a continent that is the largest and the most populous in the world. Friends, permit me to give a brief overview of the world we live in today. We are living in an era of unprecedented and accelerated changes. This is an era of turbulence, uncertainty, challenges. This is also an era of unprecedented opportunities. The old world order of unipolarity, of the domination of the West, especially economic and political domination of the United States of America, is fast disappearing. But the new world order has not yet taken shape. In this period of transition, old institutions of global governance are proving ineffective. Especially the United Nations has never been so powerless as it is today. Soon after Donald Trump became president, he had announced that he would take over Greenland and make Canada the 51st state of the United States of America. This shows he has no concern for morality or international law. What is more worrisome, friends, is that the capacity of the international community to prevent wars and its capacity to prevent new hotspots from emerging is falling woefully short. How tragic, how utterly tragic it is that just when the world is commemorating the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, tomorrow, there is no common global commemoration of this historic achievement, an achievement for the entire humanity. Worse still, Russia and Ukraine, which were together in the Soviet Union's brave fight against Hitler's barbarism, are themselves locked in a war. Israel's inhuman war on Gaza is showing no signs of coming to an end soon. Israel has conducted a genocide by killing over 50,000 Palestinians, innocent Palestinians, 1/3 of them children and women. Closer to where I live, India, that is, war clouds have appeared again in the sky. First, there was a savage terrorist attack in Kashmir from across the border. Indian armed forces have taken action against Pakistan. One hopes that this will not escalate into a full-fledged war. Talking of wars, the world is nowhere close to dismantling the stockpile of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, which pose a permanent danger to the survival of mankind on this planet, our common home, our only common home. I am reminded here of a line in one of the plays by Anton Chekhov, one of the great Russian writers. A character in Chekhov's play says that if you see a gun displayed on the set in the first act of the play, if you see a gun displayed on the set in the first act of the play, be sure that the gun is going to be used to kill somebody before the play ends. This means the probability of the nuclear weapons being used someday, somewhere, is not zero. The risk is real. Military solutions are illusory solutions. They don't solve any problems. Very often, they create new problems. Friends, our world is witnessing two other kinds of wars. Both are non-kinetic, but we cannot be complacent about their consequences. One is the most recent trade war launched by Donald Trump. In this war, we have seen that nations around the world belong to three categories. The first category is countries that bully. The second, countries that get bullied for whatever reason. And third, countries that refuse to be bullied. Trump is a bully, and Xi Jinping, Chinese president, is a leader who has refused to be bullied. The other non-kinetic war is far more serious. It is mankind's continuous assault on Mother Nature, which has caused the climate crisis and which affects all, rich or poor, small or large countries. If the world community fails to find a solution, it is going to affect all of us. In fact, the entire humanity will have to pay a heavy price. In some ways, we're already paying the price. My co-panelists and dear friends, I have briefly sketched the current global situation. It is within this context that we have to place the responsibility of India and China to join hands to create a better world. No two nations in the world carry a greater responsibility in this regard than India and China. This is a political responsibility because we both have been victims of imperialism in the past. This is geographic responsibility because we both are neighbors in Asia. And if we live as good neighbors, living in peace and with cooperation, this will send a powerful and positive message to the rest of the world, including Asia itself. This is a demographic responsibility also, because India and China are the only two nations in the world with populations of over 1 billion each. Finally, and most importantly, this is a civilizational responsibility because ours are two of the oldest and richest civilizations on the planet. Therefore, the destiny of humanity is mandating our two countries to summon the wisdom of our civilizations to show the way to the rest of the world. I speak with optimism today that India and China can discharge this responsibility that history has cast on us. What is the source of my optimism and my confidence? The answer lies in the fact that the best minds of India and China have always been great humanists and internationalists. They have stood for peace, brotherhood, justice, and common progress of the world. Permit me to give a few examples. Shazmin, how do I go to the next slide?
If you press the right arrow button, you'll be able to progress forward.
Yeah, I did that.
Um,
Just one moment, please. I go to share.
mhm.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Can you see the screen, please?
Yes, if you make it full screen, we'll be able to. From current slide,
Do I
top
make it?
left. That one
Common
there.
slide. Yeah.
Yep.
Common slide.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry for this interruption. I was saying that the best minds in India, the best minds in China have always been great humanists and great internationalists. Let me give a few examples. As you can see on the screen, this is Mahatma Gandhi, the greatest apostle of truth and nonviolence that the modern era has seen. And this is what he has to say about the responsibility of India and China. I quote, "I long for the day when a free India and a free China will cooperate together in friendship and brotherhood for their own good, for the good of Asia, and for the good of the world." He said this in 1942 in a letter to the Chinese leader, Chiang Kai-shek. And here you see a truly iconic image of Prime Minister Narendra Modi receiving Chinese President Xi Jinping at the what we call ashram, or the place of the place where Mahatma Gandhi conducted his experiments. And this is the spinning wheel, which was the symbol of India's freedom movement. And this is President Xi Jinping's visit to India in 2014. Now let me quote Mao Zedong, who led the Chinese Revolution 1949. And he says, "India has been a friendly state to China for the past 1,000 years. It will be so even for the next 1,000 years." And you see our first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, he has said, "China has learned a lot from India in the ancient past. Now in the modern era, it is India's turn to learn from China." This, again, two prime ministers, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, with whom I had the great fortune of working very closely, and Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao in Beijing 2003. Wen Jiabao said about India-China relations, I quote, "Friendliness accounts for 99.99% of the 2,200-year-old Sino-Indian exchanges, and misunderstanding merely 0.01%. It's high time we buried that 0.01% and re-established the 99.999%. This is Professor Zhixian Lin, renowned Chinese scholar and Indologist. He says, "China-India neighborliness was created in heaven and constructed on earth," which means that the fact that India and China are neighbors is not an accident. It is what heaven has wanted. Heaven wants us to be together, not just geographically, but in reshaping the world to create a better future for all. Now I come to Rabindranath Tagore, India's Nobel laureate poet, also India's national poet, who was a great friend of China. He visited China 3 times. And he was, apart from being a great admirer of China, his mission was to contribute to a new awakening of Asia, because he believed that Asia has to lead and show a new path to the world. And he says, I quote, "Age after age in Asia, great dreamers have made the world sweet with the showers of their love. Asia is again waiting for such dreamers to come and carry on the work, not for fighting, not for profit making, but for establishing bonds of spiritual relationship." I must also mention here, friends, that Tagore had made a prophecy about the future balance of power in the world. He said, "The nations which now own the world's resources fear the rise of China, and they wish to postpone the day of that rise." I repeat, the nations which own the world's resources fear the rise of China, and they wish to postpone the day of that rise. How prophetic. That prophecy of Tagore is now coming true in the 21st century, with the United States trying its best to contain China and halt its rise. This is 𝐂𝐡𝐢𝐧𝐚, who was China's foremost reformist scholar in the early 20th century. He praised Tagore as a visitor who came from a country that is, in his own words, that is our nearest and dearest brother, India. Sun Yat-sen, first president of the Republic of China, was also a great admirer of Tagore. He said, commenting on how Europe was dominating and destroying the rest of the world, he said no to the rule of might and called for the rule of right. No to the rule of might, yes to the rule of right. This is, friends, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, a great Indian freedom fighter. He said, I quote, "I'm inspired by the idea of a pan-Asian federation based on India-China solidarity." Bose was a political leader, and now I show you India's great spiritual leader, Maharishi Aurobindo. He says, I quote, "Asia is the custodian of the world's peace of mind and the physician of the maladies which Europe generates." See how the great minds of India and China, they said the same thing in different words. This is Shu Fancheng, a great Chinese yogi who spent 27 years of his life in Aurobindo's ashram in Pondicherry in India. He translated many Hindu scriptures into Chinese, and he said, the destiny of mankind has been determined by the philosophies of ancient Greece, India, and China. Dear friends, this is the heritage of India and China. These are the visionaries who had the dream of a better world, a better Asia, and they firmly believed that India and China have a responsibility to show the path leading to a new future for humanity. Even though uncertainty clouds many aspects of the future, one thing is already clear. In today's rapidly changing world, the domination of the West is coming to an end. It is an era that is witnessing the decline of the West and the rise of the rest. The rise of the rest, you can see from this graph, Asia's share in global GDP has risen to over 54%, much higher than 31% of Europe and North America. And you see how BRICS is already double the share of G7. This is the new world order. Many of you have perhaps heard of the famous British historian Angus Maddison. In his celebrated work, Contours of the World Economy from the 1st century to 2030, he writes, in 1820, China and India contributed approximately 50% of the world's GDP. 50% of the world's GDP. By 1913, that share had fallen to about 18%. That is because of colonialism. That is because of imperialism from which we both suffered. But now the world is changing. In today's resurgent Asia, India and China are rising fast. India will soon be the third largest economy in the world. But as an Indian, I have no hesitation in saying that China's progress is far more spectacular. China has already become the world's second largest economy and is within striking distance of overtaking the USA in the coming decades. China's greatest achievement has been that it has completely eradicated extreme poverty. In cutting-edge technologies such as artificial intelligence, robotics, drones, new energy, digital technology, financial technology, etc., China is, in some respects, is already ahead of America. China's lead over the United States is even more pronounced in infrastructure and mass-scale manufacturing of high-quality goods. This is most strikingly illustrated by BYD overtaking Elon Musk's Tesla in electric vehicles, Huawei giving tough competition to Apple. China is today the largest trading partner with the largest number of countries in the world, over 120. America itself has become alarmingly dependent on Chinese imports because it chose to deindustrialize itself on the mistaken belief that militarization and dollar-led financialization of its economy will forever ensure its prosperity and global hegemony. In short, China is not yesterday's Soviet Union. The United States could somehow suppress, dismantle Soviet Union. It can't do so to China anymore. My dear co-panelists and friends, this brings me to the last part of my keynote. What should India and China do together to create a better world? The rest of the international community will surely ask some tough questions to both India and China. One, are India and China capable of giving leadership to the creation of a peaceful world? Peace is the most important need of the world and also the most important enabler of progress of the world. So is India, China togetherness capable of giving leadership for a peaceful world? Second question, are India and China capable of creating a future that is more just, more harmonious, more equitable, and more democratic? Third question, are India and China capable of demonstrating a different model of economic development that cares for the environment and the planet's precious biodiversity? Four, are India and China capable of presenting a new and superior democratic model of politics and governance that gives primacy to the common people and not only to the rich and the powerful? Fifth question, are India and China capable of doing things that Europe and America have failed to do? India and China have to convince the international community to have faith in our capability to give positive answers to these questions. For this, the people, the governments, the leadership of our two countries must do 5 things. The first imperative, we must resolve the long-standing border dispute between India and China. As many of you know, this dispute precipitated a war in 1962. 5 years ago, there was a military skirmish in which soldiers from both countries died. It took 5 long years to achieve disengagement of the two militaries, and bilateral relations are slowly returning to the normal track. But the truth is that both India and China have a long way to go to normalize our bilateral relations. One bold and innovative idea for our two governments that I propose is that we should move away from exclusive national sovereignty to shared sovereignty. Earlier in my slideshow, friends, I showed how some of the best minds, the great minds of India and China in the last century had envisioned the idea of an Asian federation. This idea was the direct result of the anti-colonial struggles of the last century. It may sound utopian. Nevertheless, blind acceptance of the Westphalian model of nation state has not helped either Asia or the rest of the world. Therefore, Asia will have to devise innovative ways of international cooperation and dispute resolution based on a new concept of shared sovereignty. For example, the India-Pakistan dispute, India-China dispute, as also the maritime disputes in the South China Sea can never be satisfactorily resolved without some degree of sharing sovereignties in contested regions, without compromise and give and take, and without cooperation across borders. Second task before our two countries. India and China must move away from militarist solutions to peaceful solutions to resolve disputes. Rivalry among European nations in the past century pushed humanity into the fire of two horrific world wars. We can't emulate that example. Abandoning the militarist path and the militarist mindset also means elimination of all nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. Sadly, no major power, either India or China, and of course, United States, are anywhere close to accepting the call for nuclear disarmament. The third imperative, India and China should harmonize the dreams of respective national rejuvenation with the progress of the entire humanity. In the past, we have seen how Europe cared only for itself. And today we see how the United States of America is caring only for itself. Asia has to be different. India has to be different. China has to be different. For us in Asia, our slogan should not be India first, China first. It should be humanity first. This is indeed what the world needs in the age of globalization. Globalization is progressing inexorably in the 21st century. Growing interconnectedness and interdependence among nations and peoples cannot be rolled back. No nation, no region, and no continent can think of its destiny in isolation. In the 21st century, we cannot follow a path of East versus West or South versus North. Rather, India, China, along with other countries in Asia, we have to show the path of East plus West plus South plus North, which means helping poor countries, underdeveloped countries, especially those in Africa, to ensure that they have priority in global development. Fourth imperative, India and China must move away from profit for a few and prosperity for all, and especially prosperity for the planet. Our world in the 21st century is more prosperous than at any time in human history. This prosperity is mainly created by advancements in science and technology. Both India and China are today progressing in science and technology. And therefore, it is all the more reason why we have to cooperate in science, technology, and share the fruits with the rest of the world, especially the countries in the global south. And for this, even it means foregoing some of our own self-interest, we should be prepared. Fifth imperative, both India and China must move away from materialist civilization to revive Asia's civilizational wisdom, from materialist civilization to spiritual civilization. The goal of progress, economic progress, is not to amass more and more wealth, material wealth. Material wealth is only a means to achieve a larger end. The larger end is humanity's cultural progress and spiritual awakening. The goal of humanity is to build a new kind of human society on the principles of truth, non-violence, justice, love, compassion, tolerance for diversity, universal brotherhood, respect for nature, and respect for all forms of life. And when I say respect for diversity, it certainly includes respect for religious diversity. There is absolutely no place in today's world for notions of superiority, exclusiveness, and certainly religious intolerance, fanaticism. This is the teaching, friends, of all the great philosophers, poets, writers of India and China. This is the message India and China has to take to the rest of the world. But for this message to be credible, India and China must first incorporate these principles in our own conduct, in our own domestic societies, and in the way we deal with each other. Thank you. Thank you for your patient attention to my thoughts. In India, we say Jai Hind. Jai means victory. Victory to India, victory to China, victory to Asia, and victory to the world. Thank you. 谢谢.
Thank you, Mr. Kulkarni, for the insightful presentation. We have now come to the discussion between the special guest and co-moderators.
Allow me, as one of the organizers of this incredible event, to ask the first question, and then I'll give it to my good friend and colleague Mike Liu to ask the next one. I, as a Singapore-born Singapore grew up Chinese. I was born in India and grew up in Singapore and lived in the United States pretty much all my life after high school. And then returned back to Asia for 10 years between 2007 to 2017. I was able to conceptualize what Mr. Kulkarni was saying. But more important is that it really hit home when much later in my life, on a special occasion, I discovered that on January 10th of 1946, I was just a baby at that point of a few months. The soon-to-be Prime Minister, founding Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, said to my father, who at that time is a reporter living in India, if India and China hold together, the future of Asia is assured. listening to Mr. Kulkarni today, I would change one word of what Mr. would have said, and that is, if India and China hold together, the future of the world is assured. It goes from Asia to the world, because India and China together has close to 40% of humanity, and certainly 2/3 of world civilization and wisdom. If India and China cannot work together, there is really no hope for the world. Now, Indians have done some remarkable thing. My good friend 𝐈𝐳𝐫𝐷eepak, who's on here today, he did something I think is absolutely incredible. You know, he told me that to understand China, you have to understand the Chinese intellectual architecture. And the Chinese intellectual architecture reside in 4 monumental writings: the Great Learning, the Doctrine of the Mean, the Analects, and the Mencius. And therefore, for India and China to understand one another, at least for India, they will have to read these 4 books. And it is to Bali's tremendous credit that he took the opportunity as a great intellect in India to translate them into Hindi. Because it is not expected for Indians to read the Chinese, but it is expected for the Indians to read the Hindi. And I have been pushing my friends here all over the world, Indian friends, what are the equivalent of the 4 books of China that would constitute the India's intellectual architecture? And we have that. Then from there onwards, China should translate them into Chinese and let every Chinese read them to understand the Indians' intellectual architecture. So put all that together, today's talk is a summary of these great thoughts. I would like to ask Mr. Kulkarni, you have outlined some roadmaps to move forward. What more from what you have said should India and China do together for the world to transform the world, as crazy as it is at the moment, into something that my children and my grandchildren can see hope?
Thank you, Professor Fang. I'm so happy that you referred to Professor Deepak's excellent work in India. I have myself profited a lot by reading his works, especially the enormous cultural, spiritual interaction between India and China in ages past. It is really mind-boggling how people who sought knowledge, they braved all odds in the past centuries ago. Monks from China, like Xuanzang, they came here. And Xuanzang himself, as all of us know, he spent 17 years traveling all over India. And he took a treasure house of Buddhist writings, went back to China, got them translated. That was a time when there was no internet, no telephone, no modern mode of transport. What brought him tens of thousands of kilometers? Just the thirst for knowledge. So you have absolutely rightly pointed out that the intellectual architecture of China is something that we in India should know. And similarly, not just the ancient repositories of knowledge, but also the modern repositories of knowledge in India should be known to contemporary China. And this is where enormous work needs to happen. Unfortunately, it is not happening as far as I can see in India. Perhaps China is doing a better job, but we in India are really keeping our young generation largely ignorant about the intellectual wealth. It's not enough just to see the material wealth of China, the skyscrapers, the bullet trains, BYD and Huawei. Of course, this is great achievement of China. But I would say far more precious is the intellectual wealth of China, about which most Indians are still ignorant. And this is where we in India have a lot of work to do. Now, I go back to something else that you said, referring to the conversation between our first Prime Minister, Nehru, and your father, that if India and China come together, the future of Asia is assured. And you rightly expanded it by saying that the future of the world is assured. Now, this is in fact what Deng Xiaoping, he said to the grandson of Nehru, also another former Prime Minister of India, Rajiv Gandhi, in 1988, when Rajiv Gandhi went to Beijing. The conversation between Rajiv Gandhi and Deng Xiaoping is truly historic. And Deng said that Asian century is only possible if India and China come together. So I think that our discussion today is a small contribution for India and China to get to know each other better. And of course, for the rest of the world to know the importance of India and China coming together.
Mike?
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, please allow me to really thank Mr. Kulkarni for such a comprehensive recap of history, as well as some forward-thinking thoughts and ideas. Also, I want to thank Professor Fong to recap, on your personal experience, as well as what the things, how we can truly make Asian century as a reality in the 21st century. Well, if I look at this, the whole session we look at as we have, I look at this as really more fascinating. If I really look at one of things, I was born here in China. I'm a completely made in China Chinese. I was a bit, how to go through this journey, being scared as how to get familiar with the things in India and how to make hundreds plus of friends in India. One of the things I would really say is if you can cross the language barriers, we do not, see each other as a different nation, but the relatives or friends. Even, everywhere we are in a very complex world. We have friends here. We have, some people, maybe we are not so close. But the reality is India, China, I was able to find out, how many similarities, the values, many things when I was a kid. I was born in the 1960s. we all grow up in the large family value, believe in education. One of things I always enjoy with my Indian friends is we're always being challenged by intellectual capacity, right? And all this intellectual, sometimes we look at the being education is a privilege to explore the unknown, right? If I really look at the over centuries, China, India, we were able to share lots of wisdom, ideas, and values. I was, interested to talk to Mr. Kulkarni in your recent trip in Beijing. In the old days when I was a kid, we look at for the people happily pass away, we were saying the person just went to the West. What do we mean by West? During the Chinese history, we have this Xuanzang, we have go to the West to search for the wisdom, to search for the I would say Buddhism, right? It's kind of an enlightenment for Chinese people, how we should be able to understand to different ideas bring by the neighbor. If I look at China, India have been there for over maybe 5,000 years, right? Amazingly found out the history of India. I just see much more. It's like lost brother for a long time. But if you can cross language barrier, you see a lot of similar things. But the problem is, I believe, is happening in China as well as in India or rest of the world is that after this maybe 1962, and people become, the gap become wider. And the good thing is, if you look at the, in the recent development between two nations, I see some warming signs. I see some helping, the hope in the air. And also the 2025 marks 75 years of anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and India. I was so happy to learn India was one of first country, the support China to be independent, right? And my question for maybe for Kulkarni, from China side, I know what really happened, but from India side, what really happened? What are some root causes and to cause, over centuries relation and why the whole thing becomes so discrepancy becomes so huge, and people hardly understand each other, even within today with all the help of technology. But it seems the people, many people get a biased view, or they still, get all these things stuck in the mind, they were not really recovering from, this long history, maybe over past 2,000 years. What are some of the thinking or ideas from Mr. Kulkarni you can share with us?
Uh, thank you, my dear friend Mike. I have very fond memories of my interactions with you. Learned a lot from you because you are one person who has actually worked with a major Indian company, Infosys. So you know the Indian mind, and of course you are Chinese. And you've asked a question that really goes to the heart of our relations. And unless we tackle the difficult part of India-China relations, as I said in my earlier remarks, the rest of the world will not really have much faith that India and China can work together for a better world. We have had very close relations in the past, but the color of our relations now has changed. I would attribute that to a certain kind of narrow nationalism in both India and in China. To some extent, it's understandable because China, a great nation, which has achieved great things in the past, but experienced what is called 100 years of humiliation. Even after the revolution, it experienced difficulties, and now it's rising fast. So along with this pride, and this pride is legitimate, I sometimes feel that there is a certain narrow nationalism that is affecting China's attitude. The same is true, let me tell you, about India. There is a narrow nationalism even in India, and that is quite painful. The way we treat our smaller neighbors, the way we have somehow become indifferent to understanding our largest, most important neighbor, China. Yes, 1962 war has played a big role in changing our attitude towards China, and we have yet to overcome the bitter experience of that past. But that's no excuse. We have to befriend our neighbor. The Prime Minister with whom I worked very closely, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, he used to say that you can change your friends, you cannot change your neighbors. China and India are forever going to be neighbors. And therefore, as Pandit Nehru, Jawaharlal Nehru said, that even though China learned a lot from India in the past, Buddhism, but in the modern era, India has to learn a lot from China. And that's why we must understand China better without prejudice. And I would say that one big hurdle that is coming in the way of India understanding China, and perhaps China understanding India, is that the world, even though the world is changing, the West's domination is coming down, as far as the global media is concerned, it is still dominated by the West. We don't have independent and our own eyes and ears in China. You know, it might perhaps surprise many people who are participating in this discussion to know that right now, there are no direct flights between India and China. We are neighbors. Also, there is only one Indian journalist in China and one Chinese journalist in India. We are huge countries. Our understanding of China still comes from the Western news sources, media sources, Western academics, and they have their own agenda. Why should we depend on Americans and Europeans to know China? We should know ourselves. And when we know ourselves, as you rightly pointed out, the amount of commonalities and similarities, amazing, in spite of language barrier. And I would say that the best thing about technological revolution is that the language barrier is no longer going to be as much of an obstacle as it was in the past. Today, simultaneous translation is becoming commonplace. We can learn so much about China using modern technology. So my suggestion is that we should be open-minded. Again, we should learn from our forefathers. Take Tagore. The more I read about Tagore, there is an essay he wrote about nationalism, and he was a fierce critic of narrow nationalism. He was a patriot, but he was against narrow nationalism. And because he was against narrow nationalism, he traveled all across the world, east, west, except perhaps Africa, with just one message, that we all belong to one common humanity. And there were similar great thinkers of China. So now the time has come. Our two countries should shed the prejudices that have crept in the recent past. We should understand our responsibility, not only towards each other, but also towards the rest of the world. Now, finally, I would like to make one point. Mike, you said family values. Family values are so strong in China and in India. And family for us was not just our immediate family. It extended to the entire global family. So thousands of years ago, the great sages of India, they said in Sanskrit, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam means the entire world is one family. This was said thousands of years ago. In the age of globalization, in the age of interdependence and interconnectedness, this is 1,000,000 times more true, that we are just one global family. This is what China believes, this is what India believes, but we must now begin to practice it.
Thank you very much. I would be remiss if I didn't invite my good friend Bali to say something.
Thank you, Professor Fang, Kulkarni ji, and Mike Cleo. It's a great privilege to say a few words in this August gathering, and the topic, I think it is very dear to me also, and we have been discussing it quite often at every forum. In fact, I just visited China and came back from there. It was a great experience. I think Kulkarni ji, he covered an immense ground in his talk, right from the civilizational interconnectedness to the colonial connections and to the contemporary issues. And not only the contemporary issues, but also he laid a blueprint, for what India and China should be working on to have a better world for our people. I think I would argue on two grounds. One is, if we undo, the paradigm of geopolitics and reinforce the paradigm of geocivilization, I think that would be a wonderful thing if we can do, because we have seen how interconnected China and India, it immensely benefited both the people. Not only both the people, but also the polities in the vicinity by the wisdom of the intellect and also the discoveries they made, thus bringing huge benefits to the humanity. So that is one thing I think we need to work on this. And 62, I believe it was also the product of this geopolitical paradigm. I think we have forgotten the geocivilizational interconnectedness, which really need to be worked upon, by the intellectuals. And I'm doing a little bit, work in this direction by translating a few things and also writing a few things. Second, I think as Kulkarni ji was referring to, I call it the discourse power, as it is known in political science and international relations. That is also the need of the hour in both India and China. What kind of discourse power we should be having if we look at the future, together, or what China calls build a community of shared future for mankind. Therefore, here again, the intellectuals and also the media, I think, so they need to play a very, very positive role. And I think the role they are playing at this point in time, because I go through Chinese media, I go through Chinese social media, and I also look at, Indian media discourse. I am sorry to say that it's very, very negative, especially at this point in time when the temperature is high between India and Pakistan. You see the kind of discourse which is emanating from India as well as from China. It is very, very negative. So therefore, I'm a little worried in which direction we are going. On both these counts, I think we really need to work hard. As Mike Liu rightly said, that there are a lot of complementarities and potentialities between India and China. And why not to pool our energy, to these direction and provide, public goods, not only to our people, but to the region and also beyond, which is the need of the hour. I think I would agree with Kulkarni ji, as I went to some of the interiors of Chongqing and then, onward to Beijing. And I discovered how the public goods have been provided to, remotest of areas in China, whether they are the roads, whether the electricity and the gas or other amenities. And not only that, but also the kind of, I would say, economic modeling, or I would say it's semi-urban model, which have been developed by China for these interiors by identifying one village, one product. So this is the model I was very, very fascinated, and how this this model has been integrated, with various supply chains, right from the village collective, all up to various parts of other cities, mega cities, bringing affluence to the people. I think these are the things which India need to learn from China, and there is huge scope. Not only these small models, but also the entire gambit of technology, so on and so forth. So therefore, I think if we try to recalibrate, this power of discourse or the discourse power in right direction, I think not only the future of Asia would be assured. I think as Professor Fang replaced it with the world, I think the future of world would also be assured. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bali.
May I say something?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
I think Professor Bali has, I call him Deepak. He has really spoken for all of us in saying that the world needs to transition from focus on geopolitics to geo-civilizational issues. Because when we look at the long histories of all the countries, all the cultures, we don't see just conflicts. We see how, despite conflicts, wise people resolved those conflicts and brought countries, cultures closer. Politics, geopolitics only focuses on the here and now. And therefore, all our energies are focused only on things that divide us. Geocivilization expands our horizon. Unfortunately, most politicians, of course, there are many outstanding politicians, but many politicians, they don't like to dig deeper into history. And this is where scholars, intellectuals, journalists, cultural people have a big role to play, and even religious leaders have a big role to play. Now, Professor Deepak also mentioned discourse power, and both India and China have so much to tell the rest of the world and change the global discourse, especially on development. And what Professor Deepak said about provision of public goods, what China has achieved is so inspirational. Let me give an example. Providing roads and electricity, and this is one kind of provision of public goods. But just a month and a half, I went to one of the three poorest regions of China, in Yunnan province. And in a matter of a decade, it's been completely transformed. And not just in terms of material prosperity. What impressed me the most was how some of the best public libraries have been created in villages. We were earlier talking about thirst for knowledge. People going great lengths in search of knowledge in the past. Now, we can see China has not only created great libraries, great concert halls, and such public goods, but also public libraries in small villages. And some of the most iconic public libraries are now built in villages. Now, this is what should come into our discourse. This is what's going to really create hope in countries, especially countries of the global south, that we can change the reality. And I would like to again say this, and I would like to say this especially to my countrymen, India, that we have a lot to learn from China.
Thank you very much. Well, there is a question coming in from the group. Dr. Bhamadev Sikdal, are you still there? Dr. Bhamadev Sikdal.
Yes, I am from Kathmandu. Namaste, Professor.
Okay, very good. You have an interesting question. Would you like to, first of all, could you show us your face?
Yeah, sure.
And explain a little bit who you are and then your question. Thank you.
Yeah. Namaste. I'm Bhamadev Sikdal from Kathmandu, and I was a professor. And by the way, I joined Central Bank, and I spent 17 years over there. And after that, I again joined Center for Policy Studies and Rural Development, think tank and NGO, which is concerned with the policy issues, research and advocacy at Kathmandu. And the chairperson is Dr. Sriram Singh Paudel, and we are working, with so many policy level research and
Thank you.
Studies.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
What is your question?
My question is, there is a kind of stalemate between India and Pakistan that is presently happening, and what could be the role of China at this juncture, and if there is the deepening of relation between China and India, what sorts of benefit could achieve by the small South Asian country? Thank you. Namaste. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Kulkarni?
Yeah, sure. I've heard the question. It's a very important question. I'm sure that most participants in the discussion are concerned what is happening between India and Pakistan right now. I do not want to get into what has happened. I only want to repeat what I said earlier, that the latest conflict should not escalate further. It should be de-escalated. Now the question is, what can China do? Now, this question is best answered by Chinese, but I would say China is a common neighbor of India and Pakistan. As an Indian, I would like to see Pakistan prosper. This may not be a very popular view right now in India, but we don't want any harm to Pakistan. Pakistan should remain united. Pakistan should progress on all fronts. But there is just one issue. I touched upon it in my presentation, that on the issue of tolerance, religious tolerance, there needs to be introspection. Terrorism can have absolutely no place in a civilized society. It has in fact harmed Pakistan itself much more than other countries in the world. Terrorism must not become an instrument of state policy. Let saner voices prevail, leading to, again, borrowing the phrase from Professor Deepak, Geocivilizational. In terms of civilization, India and Pakistan have been indistinguishable. India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, all the countries in South Asia, right from Afghanistan, eastwards towards Myanmar, we are all part of one common South Asian civilizational family. In my own small way, I've been trying to promote better relations between India and Pakistan. I hope that after this crisis is handled with wisdom on both sides, South Asia becomes a region of cooperation, which unfortunately it has not been so far. The South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC, has not met for the last 11 years. It is in coma. The last summit of SAARC was actually in Kathmandu, in Nepal. After that, the leaders of the South Asian countries have not come together for a summit meeting. It's most unnatural. This is because we have given somehow primacy to geopolitical, geosecurity issues and completely forgotten all the things that unite us.
Excuse me, could I put one thing I forgot, on the question, the second one, that is, what sorts of attitude should India, taken, on the BRI issue, that was put forward by, Xi Jinping, and which is going on, and what sorts of opinion should change by India at this juncture, sir?
See, on the question of BRI, Belt and Road
Yeah.
Initiative, I'm one of the few in India who has, right from the beginning, argued that India should join the Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah.
Because connectivity within South Asia is a matter of utmost urgency. Even though in terms of population, we are the most populous region in the world, with a combined population of nearly 1.8 billion, we are also one of the least integrated. I just now mentioned that there are no direct flights between India and China.
Yeah.
There are also no direct flights between India and Pakistan for many, many years. And as a result, all countries, to smaller or greater extent, we are suffering. There is very little intra-regional trade amongst countries of South Asia. So therefore, connectivity and cooperation are important. And the Belt and Road Initiative is one such connectivity project that can bring countries together. Of course, I'm also of the view that China should have engaged in greater consultation with China, with India, before undertaking some projects under BRI. But in course of time, I do hope that these differences will be overcome and we all can participate connectivity projects, including greater connectivity between India, Nepal, and China. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Nice to meet you, sir. Thank you.
Mike, do you want to say something?
I think maybe we got maybe 8 or 7 minutes. Let's open the floor for the audience. If anyone who want to raise up any last questions. Anyone from audience?
Well, I would
Maybe-
like to. Oh, go ahead.
No, some questions might have come in the chat box.
No, I didn't notice any. Let me ask. You know, the BRI is a big issue, both for India and especially now, India's infrastructure requires significant upgrading. I'm sure everybody would agree with me. And I know that Bali has been thinking a lot about this. In fact, we have talked quite a bit about this. I would like to hear what Bali has to say about India's perspective on the Belt and Road Initiative.
Thank you, Professor Fang. In fact, like Kulkarni ji, I'm also one of the votaries for BRI. In fact, in 2014, when President Xi Jinping rolled out Belt and Road Initiative from POA Forum, I was the first Indian, to convene an international conference in JNU, and it was a mega conference. And later on, we published the proceedings in a volume. It is called China's Global Rebalancing and the New Silk Road. It was published by Springer, I think in 2016 or 17, I forgot the date. And later on, it was also translated into Chinese by Shantung Publication. And it was widely circulated and well received in India and also globally, because Springer, they told me that within first few months, 30,000 copies were sold, which is very, very impressive for an academic work. And I think I agree with Kulkarni ji when he says that China perhaps didn't consult India when they were negotiating, or rather, they already put on board the so-called flagship CPAC. And I remember in various discussions and forums on BRI, we were deliberating that how India would be on board, what sort of the changes could be brought in. But I think there was sort of like stalemate. And later on, India also ignored CPAC. And I think if I say, open an eye and turn a blind eye to the CPAC. But most of the projects which were initiated and executed in India, from Chinese side, they were still under BRI. So India was still cooperating. But it was later on when the relationship deteriorated, especially I would say from Doklam onward from 2017, and then 2020, the Galvan, and of course the pandemic and so on and so forth, that India took a very, very stringent stand and started to go against it. But I think still, if there is recalibration from both the sides, I think India would be happy to have projects and investment from China. As I said, that there are a lot of potentialities, and complementarities for both the markets and investment in India. And I don't think India should be too much bothered about if China calls them BRI or any other project, So that is my understanding about BRI.
Very good.
Thank you.
Mike, do you want to make a comment?
I look at the BRI definitely has been one of key initiative from China. I think maybe when China first introduced BRI initiative, I don't think outside fully understand what the context, because the Chinese idea is normally start with something very broad and a bit vague without, very concrete framework or idea how this initiative will be implemented, right? So if I look at even BRI, the names have been changing over time, but that's a way of Chinese thinking. I think is like, Mr. Kulkarni and Sudheendra rightly said, this, if we talk about international initiative, we need much more collaboration, consultation, and discussing to align the ideas. Because I look at from Chinese side, I'm teaching BRI a number of occasions. I look at there is no intention for Chinese to interfere outside. It's really leveraging what the capability we have and reach some commercial benefit for the country needed. Otherwise, some country maybe they need 30, 50 years to achieve the same results. But in the today very complex world, many things have been misunderstood or intentionally or unintentionally. But that's, I would say, that's part of the life, right? I look at one of things, Professor Feng, there is a question in the chat box. Maybe we can try to take that as the last one before we conclude the session.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, very important. Yeah, we have the question from Madhusudanan and Pila. Is he still here? You can identify yourself and repeat the question. This question is for Mr. Kulkarni.
Well,
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
yep.
Okay, my name is Madhusudanan Pillai. I'm just a retiree who's interested in
Can you show us your face?
Yeah, I'm trying to. I've got one of those old
Go ahead.
computers.
Go ahead. Let's not waste time.
Yeah, okay. Let me think. Okay, my question is, Mr. Kulkarni mentioned sharing sovereignty. I'm just saying, if you can elaborate on what it means. in terms of concept as well as how do you practically go about having it?
Yeah.
I'm not too sure. Is it a buffer zone type or because you're talking about all the countries, and I best example we say between China and India at the moment with the border issues when you say shared sovereignty or the South China Sea. Okay.
We should learn from history. For thousands of years, nation states and nation state itself is somewhat of a modern concept, but countries and cultures have coexisted without sharp boundaries. And the fact that they did not have very sharply delineated boundaries enabled them to have more or less free interaction. Now, with in changing times, especially in the era when the West dominated and changed the landscape of the world, the rest of the world followed European example, Westphalian nation state, that is, every country having 100% sovereignty over its territory, and the territory itself marked very sharply on the map. As a result, many countries, especially countries that are locked in disputes with neighbors, are fixated on the boundary, as if this is how they existed for thousands of years. The fact of the matter is that people, communities, have lived together on both sides of the border. In fact, if you see the border between India and Pakistan, India and Bangladesh, it is so unnatural that it was created not even by us, it was created by our colonial masters. And suddenly, families, communities that were living together for centuries, they became separated as if they belong to this nation and that nation. Now, I mentioned in my presentation that Asia has to show a new way. And one such concept is shared sovereignty. Take, for example, the Kashmir issue. The conflict, the dispute between India and Pakistan over Kashmir cannot be solved militarily. We have had 4 wars since 1947, when India was partitioned and Pakistan was created as a separate Muslim nation. Even after 4 wars, the problem remains unresolved. Even right now, as we speak, when there is so much tension, this is not going to lead to any change whatsoever. Pakistan cannot take the part of Kashmir that is with India, and India cannot take the part of Kashmir that is under Pakistan's control. Now, what then is the solution to the Kashmir issue? In my view, it is sharing sovereignty. Let Kashmir belong to India, to Pakistan, and also, of course, Kashmiris themselves. Now, if we can put this into practice peacefully and see the good results, and maybe after a decade or two, the 2 Punjabs which have been divided, so unnatural. There is a Pakistani Punjab, there is an Indian Punjab. Again, we can come together. The province of Sindh, in fact, the Sindh is the cradle of Indian civilization. It is in Pakistan. Bangladesh, one part of Bengal, another part of Bengal, which is in India. So we have to think in new ways. And I would go a step further and say that even India, China, boundary dispute. Shared sovereignty is a concept that can help us. Looking at the maritime conflict or dispute in South China Sea. And as we all know, maritime is going to be extremely important in the days to come. You cannot have a clear boundary in the oceans. And oceans actually connect countries. They don't divide countries. So therefore, going forward in the age of globalization, in the days when technology, digital technology has already made the entire world into one global family, one global village, we have to think in new ways. And this is where the best minds of India, the best minds of China, and the best minds of other countries, we have to come together and find solutions that are acceptable to all.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you very much.
Mr. Kulkarni. And I look at this as such a profound and also challenging, as well as very encouraging for, like-minded people to connect. Especially I like when you said, ocean connect the people, not dividing the people. I think that just, beautifully summarizes the whole thing. So, Professor Fong, if I may, I just do a quick my wrap up, and then I leave to you to do the final wrap up.
Okay.
Okay. So I look at as the time we are, running out. I look at one of things, the key learning I'm taking from today's session is small things will make a huge impact. Like quickly have said, the ocean, like share the community or so-called the all these boundaries or borders are defined by the human. If the trust is not there, then will make a task very difficult to accomplish. So if I may take a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, he was saying, relationships are based on 4 principles: respect, understanding, acceptance, and appreciation. So for India and China to work together to really to be the chief architect of the new chapter of globalization, we need to still obey, embrace these 4 principles. Without have all these principles in mind, everything will be too distractive or challenging for the human to handle. Bear in mind, China and India will always a proud nation with a long history or civilization. Like Mr. Kulkarni mentioned earlier, it's a time to take actions, right? Let's connect like-minded people to take baby steps and make this reality a place. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. I think we are coming to an end, which I hope it gives people some form of thinking about our future. China and India are 2 truly remarkable countries in today's geopolitics. They're both 1.4 billion people. There are no other countries in the world at the moment that even come close to that number. They are literally sitting next to each other. They are truly neighbors. They have been neighbors ever since probably the earth was created. Sort of strange that in between there's the Himalayas, but still they're neighbors. And like all we're saying, neighbors, in this case, this neighbor is not going to go away. And also these 2 neighbors have long history and long human wisdom that's inherent in them. one of the great surprising thing about India is that the number of universities in India that is studying Chinese wisdom is relatively small. In fact, it's tiny. The same is said that the number of universities in China that studies the great South Asia, India, of course, is the dominant part of South Asia, is also very, very small. In fact, you can count with my hands the number of universities that actually spend significant time in learning about the history and culture and the civilization of its neighbor. I think for us, for the Chinese and for the Indians, to achieve a new level of nirvana, which Mr. Kulkarni has very clearly outlined, they will have to understand the civilizations of each other. And therefore, I really believe that higher education in India and China, as what Bali has been doing at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, should be a common thing in Indians' higher education and a common thing in Chinese higher education. If you don't understand each other's culture, history, and civilization, there is no communications possible. And I think that things are now happening. And what Mr. Kulkarni has told me today has given me a new sense of hope, because what he said, I have not heard before, not from anyone, even from Bali, who is certainly a forward thinker. And so let's see that the future is changing. By the way, I have noticed, I may be wrong, I follow a lot the Indians' newscasts in the last couple years. And I notice there is a slight change in the tone towards China in the last few years, especially in the last few months. So maybe things are moving in the right direction right now. And I certainly hope that that is the case. Once again, I want to thank Mr. Kulkarni. I want to thank my colleague, Mike, for basically, he suggested to have this discussion. So I'm going to give him completely credit for even suggesting this and suggesting Kulkarni to be our keynote speaker. I hope that with this little pebble thrown on a big ocean, that the wave it created could change into a tsunami. Thank you very much to everyone, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
Thank you all.
Kulkarni, for your excellent presentation, as well as your forward-thinking ideas. Let's embark this journey, although we know it's difficult, but you know, we all come with a long civilization history. That's what we mean for, right? Thank you so much, and thank Deepa and thank
Thank you.
Jasmine for arranging this whole thing. Of course, thank our dear friend, Professor Fong. Thank you.
Well, I especially want to thank the founder of World Scientific, Mr. 𝐂𝐴𝐚, who has been supporting this particular form of forum for almost 3 years now. And I think that his vision, you know, there's no reason for him to do this, but except the fact that he sees living in Singapore, they think of the world. And I think that that is really credible. I want to thank 𝐂𝐴𝐚 again for the effort. And of course, 𝐿𝐴𝐚 for doing all the technical work in providing this. 𝐿𝐴𝐚 is just great. Thank you very much.
Please. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.